Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the GD Report. I am D.
G, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. You almost forgot who you were. Everybody,
Not that old.
hope everybody's doing well. This Delta variant is spiking up the COVID numbers all across the country, especially in the South where I am, which is why I have this right here, even though I've been vaccinated. Because there's a lot of breakthrough cases happening and a lot of people contracting it that have been vaccinated, and basically all because people are being selfish and won't get vaccinated. And
Yep.
And then the fact that they won't get vaccinated and then they won't wear a mask.
Right.
So because of their quote unquote personal freedom.
Yep.
And
I was at a Costco meeting yesterday, and they were talking about the numbers. And by the way, Denver today went to, or I guess yesterday, instituted a county-wide mask mandate. So Costco's now back to wearing, employees are back to wearing masks, and I think they're requiring members to wear them as well. But our boss said, do everybody a favor, do yourself a favor, protect your health, and go get the shot. And 3 people behind me at the same time said, nope. I'm just like, wow, how stupid can you be? So
yeah, it's really crazy. And then you add in the fact that you're starting to see some and we'll get into some of the poll numbers later in Florida, but Florida is a hot spot. Arkansas is a hot spot, and the Arkansas governor now is lamenting the fact that he signed a ban on local mask mandates.
Yep.
And so he's asking the legislature to go back in session and rescind that law, and the legislature's laughing in his face and saying we'll never do that because that's against people's freedom, quote unquote freedom. And so they've created a monster, and it's what's going to happen, unfortunately, I'm afraid, is that this variant, or there's another variant as well coming now that they're saying that's based out of, I believe it's coming out of South America.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And unfortunately, what's going to happen is you're going to see a lot more unvaccinated people die, and you're going to start seeing a lot of kids get sick.
Yep. Well, we've already seen a spike in kids. So yeah, this thing is real. People need to protect themselves.
Yeah. So, well, we got off on a different topic than we planned on. So why don't we talk a little bit about what's happening in, obviously in DC, we got a lot of stuff happening, but there's been some big things in the news in the last week about all the things that transpired between the November election last year and the January 6th insurrection, and then the inauguration of President Biden. And so what a lot of people have been calling the attempted Trump coup.
Yeah, well, I think, from what I've read, I'm reading the I Alone Can Fix It, the book by 2 Washington Post reporters. I mean, there's some scary stuff in there about what he tried to do and how he basically tried to strong arm people to just say the numbers are wrong and he would take care of it. We talked a little bit about that last week, and then in the pregame tailgate show, you were telling me there's some even more scary stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So some reporting's come out now that kind of the full picture of what went on behind the scenes. But the biggest in the recent news, the biggest 3 points was that on December 27th, Trump had pressured, and this came from acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen's notes, but Trump had pressured him to, quote, just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman. And that's from Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue's notes, who was in the meeting as well. A day later, on the 28th, acting DOJ official Jeffrey Clark, who was in charge of their civil division, bought it so hard into Trump's lies, or wanted to assuage him, that he drafted a letter where he suggested in the letter that election irregularities existed in the Georgia election, even though there weren't. And then it got so bad to the point that he drafted this letter where he wanted Rosen to send to Governor Kemp in Georgia, and then also the legislative leaders, basically saying they had constitutional powers to pick their own electors. at that point.
Which they
And it
don't.
was exactly right. They don't by Georgia law or by US law. So they would have gone against the will of the Constitution. They would have gone against the will of the voters, and they would have gone against the will of the Georgia Constitution. And it got so bad that the chief of staff for Rosen drafted letters of resignation in case his boss was going to be pushed out, because Clark was meeting with Trump as well individually. So, I mean, this, and they always say what's past is prologue, and this is forecasting to us what will happen if the American people are asleep at the wheel, or if their votes are not counted in the next election,
Right.
and Republicans take back power in any way. The Republican Party, as it's formed right now, takes
Right.
back party. This is what's going to happen. And when you and I said stuff in 2016, we said stuff during throughout the 4 years that former President Trump was in office. You got accused of it. I got accused of it constantly. Oh, it's just hyperbole, and it's just
Yeah.
the libs overreacting, and they're just comparing just anti-Trump, and he'd never do that. He'd never overturn the will of the people. And you've got clear documentation that he tried everything his darndest to overturn it.
It's still doing it.
And he's still planning to lie today.
Right. So, when I was a sports writer, it was pretty common knowledge that to throw a football game, you needed 2 of 3 people. You needed a referee. That was the one. So you need one referee. And then you either needed a center or the quarterback. And if you got all 3, you could pretty much do whatever you want to. So my question is, I'm wondering, how many people do you need to perform a silent coup? I mean, a bloodless coup.
Yeah.
Because, if Brian Kemp goes along with that, if that letter gets sent, Brian Kemp goes along, and Arizona goes along, and Michigan goes along, and Pennsylvania goes along, we got a second term of Donald Trump.
Well, and at that point, I don't know that we have another election.
Yeah, maybe not. He was one of the things in this book that I'm reading, I Alone Can Fix It. It's gone into detail about how disappointed he was about his military parade being canceled, and how Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, basically was the one who scaled it back and cut it down. And, he didn't want to, Trump wanted to have tanks and howitzers and everything on the White House lawn, and, all up and down Pennsylvania Avenue. Those are the things that, Milley told him this. He goes, that's what North Korea does. That's what China does. That's what Stalin did. We don't do that in America. And yet that's exactly what Trump wanted. And, a certain percentage of his base was outraged when it got downsized.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. And the thing is, there are still people, you probably run into them, I run into them all the time, that say, oh, the election was stolen, it was a fraud, and Biden's not even technically president, and on. And you go, how did we get to a point where something that's such a blatant lie is being accepted as truth? And it's because we had another party in our country, the Republican Party, that coddled it, they coaxed it, they encouraged it. They did everything they could, and they never stood up to him. They had two chances. They had 2 chances to remove him from office, because they knew the stuff he was doing, and they've not only accepted it, they've gone full 110% in. And people can say it's hyperbole if they want. We talked about this either last week or the week before, but I fully expect if the Republicans were to win the House of Representatives, it would not shock me at all if they didn't pick Donald Trump as their speaker.
Yeah, we talked about that on the podcast. I firmly believe in order to put him back in power, they will elect him as their speaker. They will then move to impeach Biden and Harris, and the Senate will, if the Senate is in the Republican hands, they'll remove them. And they'll do away with the 60 vote margin, and they'll go with simple majority. They'll pass. They'll all vote for it, and we'll have Donald Trump as the president. And people will be outraged. There'll be protests in the streets. We'll have a civil war. And anybody that thinks that can't happen, just, as my great grandmother used to say, stand behind the door and watch.
No,
So crazy stuff.
it really is crazy. So why don't we, speaking of that, why don't we talk about the infrastructure bill? We're getting close to, there's actually a funeral tomorrow in Wyoming for Mike Enzi, who the former senator who passed away. So many of the sitting senators are flying to that, but they'll be flying back tomorrow afternoon, evening, and Donald Trump, I got him on my mind. Chuck Schumer is going to keep the Senate in session over the weekend to try to get the bipartisan infrastructure bill passed, get it through. And so they've been
Doesn't
allowing.
it still have to go to the House?
Well, they'll get it through the Senate, and then the House is obviously a simple majority.
Yeah, but they're out for 7 weeks.
Yeah. Well, the key is getting it done through the Senate. That's the key. That'll be the heavy lift, providing that the progressive wing doesn't pull out in the House, but that's a different story. So, but
Right.
why don't you tell us, there's an interesting tidbit you found out about from the infrastructure bill. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so hidden in the infrastructure bill is let me get you the page. Give me just 1 second. It's on page 511, and it's a per mile tax pilot program. So basically what they want to do is they want to equip certain vehicles with in the test program. They want to do it. They want to test it in all 50 states. They want to put a device in your vehicle that would then be required, mandatory if this goes into effect. But during the test, they would put it in just some test vehicles, and they want to see how far people drive and how much revenue this thing would bring in. They want to charge you 8 cents a mile per however many miles you drive. And so the language says the objectives of the pilot program are A, to test the design, acceptance, implementation, and financial sustainability of a national motor vehicle per mile user fee. B, to address the need for additional revenue for surface transportation, infrastructure, and a national motor vehicle per mile user fee. And C, to provide recommendations relating to the adoption and implementation of a national motor vehicle per mile user fee. So they would also use smartphone applications, use telemetric data collected by automakers, motor vehicle data obtained by car insurance companies, data from states that received a grant under Section 6020 of the FAST Act, as in effect on the day before the enactment of this act, motor vehicle data obtained from fueling stations, and any other method that the federal government considers appropriate. Anybody that thinks this, and I know you and I disagreed on the pregame tailgate show, but anybody that thinks that this is not going to get implemented, I think is misguided. I think it's going to go. So the pilot plan would go for 3 years. It would be implemented, presented to the Biden administration in the last year of Biden's first term, and it would be up to them to decide whether they're going to implement it or not. And Congress would have a lot to say about that. But if this infrastructure bill passes with bipartisan support, and it's in there, and they see how much revenue this thing can bring in, it'll be like marijuana. Once states see how much money marijuana brings in, they're all on board for doing something with it. Even Oklahoma's got medical marijuana. So does Texas, although Texas has a really crazy rule. But governments love money. They love more money. And once this thing goes into effect, we're going to see how it's going to drain our pocketbooks, I think.
Well, I just it's another form of a gasoline tax, and nobody likes that.
Right.
So I guess I would want to know how do they bill you for it? There's got to be some implementation. Does it come off your taxes at the end of the year? Is it a monthly usage fee? And there's a lot of things. And then the other thing could be a stick to try to get more people to convert to electric as well. maybe the
Yep.
tax happens if it's on gas vehicles. So there's lots of things that go into interim study and never happen completely.
Right.
The only caveat I'll say to you on the difference between this and medical marijuana is that there's a lot more Republicans that get high than people know.
Right. Yeah, you're right about that.
So there's a lot of people that were happy with that passing, because it's one of those things. It's like when we passed a revised liquor law in the state of Oklahoma that said you could buy wine and beer and full strength beer, but then wine in the grocery store.
Right.
With all the churches and the conservative bent of our state, they said this will never pass. Same thing happened with the lottery.
Yep.
This will never pass because we're such a moral state, and they both passed easily by big majorities because of the secret ballot.
Right. Yeah.
I grew up a Southern Baptist, and they used to always say Southern Baptists are really friendly people unless you see them in the liquor store.
Right. Yeah, I'll never forget. I was back before that lottery passed, when I was living in Oklahoma. We had to drive to Kansas.
I know.
To get the tickets, and so I was standing there in line. I was buying them for the company, and the guy behind me was from Chickasha, and that the lottery was on the ballot, and I said, "Hey, how do you think about that lottery ballot in Oklahoma?" He goes, "We don't need that in Oklahoma." And I'm thinking, dude, you just drove 3 hours one way, stand in line to buy a lottery ticket. You don't want to do that at your local 7-Eleven?
Yeah. I thought one of the smartest things that I'd seen was in the state of New Hampshire. When you cross from Massachusetts to New Hampshire, their travel plazas have state-owned liquor stores in the travel plaza. And so the state not only gets the taxes off of it, they get the profit off of it too.
Yeah, smart.
So, all right, which leads us to our next topic. After we've paid our usage tax on our mileage that we've driven,
right? Driving on down.
We're in the mood to go on vacation on down to the Sunshine State in Florida, where the guy who consistently polls ahead of Donald Trump in the Republican straw polls is Ron DeSantis, who is really a Trump Jr. Kind of acolyte, where he wants to be Mr. Tough Guy and Mr. Mouthy and really over the top and say all this stuff. So some poll numbers came out today, which were pretty eye-opening from a standpoint that actually I think they published yesterday, but it was, I think it was Miami Herald, but it was his approval rating was at 43%. And his disapproval rating was 48%. And that was before things have gotten even worse this week. COVID numbers are spiking through the roof.
Yep.
He refuses to allow mask mandates at the local level. It's amazing all these Republicans who wanted to allow bakers and florists not to do wedding cakes for gay people or do flowers for lesbian weddings. Suddenly they want state socialist control when it comes to be able to tell local school districts and local businesses what they can and can't do in those businesses as far as public safety goes. DeSantis has gone to court to sue Norwegian and a couple of the other cruise lines because they want to have vaccine mandates and mask mandates on the cruise ships. And he doesn't want them to do that, to the point that Norwegian is considering no longer anchoring out of Florida.
Right. Well, they could go up to South Carolina and do the same thing.
They can go to South. They do.
Georgia.
They already do New Orleans, South Carolina. They've got plenty of ports that they can do Puerto Rico. They've got some of the ships due out of there and origin out of there. But Mr. DeSantis's popularity is not only the thing that's underwater. This is the first poll he's had where he's been head to head with who's considered his main competition in the Democratic primaries, former governor, now member of Congress, Charlie Crist.
Right. Former Republican governor.
Former Republican who switched to the Democratic Party. And he's at 45%. DeSantis is at 44%. But it's even though it's within the margin of error, it's the first time DeSantis is pulled behind anybody.
Well, Jen Psaki in her briefing today said that Florida accounts for 25% of the nation's cases of COVID, new cases of COVID. So he's gonna COVID's gonna get DeSantis just like it got Trump. So he doesn't have a plan. He can't have a plan because he's been railing against masks for so long. And masks work. We know that they work.
The data proves it.
Yeah, and he's been railing against people getting the shot. And we know the shot works. The one thing the shot will do for you, you may still get the Delta variant, but you're not going to die from it. You might get pretty sick, but having the shot, but you don't have the shot and you get the Delta variant, your chances of dying go up astronomically.
Yeah. Well, and again, I'll say it, it's the same. It's such a great parallel that you brought up Trump there too, because it's this almost the exact same position that Trump was in March of last year, where DeSantis could step up right now and be a leader.
Yep.
And he could go, you know what? This Delta variant's a completely different animal, and it's a lot more dangerous than the virus. And so I'm gonna change my mind on the mask. I'm gonna allow I'm going to push the vaccines like never before, and he could be a leader and not only probably win re-election because he has the willingness to step up and own it, but he'd save people's lives.
Yep.
Because you just see, I'm almost weary every night on whatever news you watch, other than Fox because they're not going to cover it. But almost every news station you watch has a story every night of somebody who was a Trump voter, who said the vaccine was a Bill Gates conspiracy and they got COVID, and now they're saying, I wish I would have taken the vaccine.
Yep. Well, wasn't there a conservative talk show host that?
There's a conservative talk show host out of Tennessee. The same thing happened. There's several Republican legislators. One of the Republican legislators, I believe, was the guy from Louisiana who died from COVID. Yeah. And then his wife ran for the seat and won the seat. She has been speaking out about the how people need to take the vaccine because Louisiana's on fire with COVID right now too.
And they're at 33% statewide, which is the lowest in the country.
And their governor, John Bel Edwards, who's a Democrat, won re-election last year, by the way. He just reinstated a mask mandate statewide. So it's what leaders do. You look at a health crisis and you say, where does the science take us? And you take the politics out of it. And that's just a shame that Trump and company politicized this thing from the get-go, because it never should have been political.
Right.
So
yeah, you're right. It never should have been political.
So DeSantis, though, we'll see. We talked about this on the pregame tailgate that it's almost a parallel to a Chris Christie, or there's been several other governors who were that way, where they didn't focus necessarily on their reelection or on taking care of things at home. They were too focused on 4 years out and being the heir apparent and running for president, and they end up either losing reelection, or in Christie's case, having something like the Bridgegate scandal, which really cost him the chance to be a nominee.
Yeah.
To be able to do that, and also his hug of Obama didn't help either.
Right. Well, don't count him out. As with Richard Nixon, people sometimes go away and come back. But as far as DeSantis, my friends that live in South Florida, they assured me he was going to be the next president, and I told them, I said, don't discount Biden running again and winning, although I think he's got a number two on the ticket problem. But I didn't want to tell him that the front runner this far out almost never gets the nomination. So
yeah, because if that was the case, we would have President Giuliani.
Yeah.
We would have President, I'll make sure and clarify which one I'm talking about, but we would have President Mario Cuomo.
Right.
We would have had President Gary Hart.
Yep. And it'd be a different world. So,
yeah.
Anyway, closing out the show tonight, we talked about the funeral for Senator Enzi. The labor movement today lost a giant, and I mean, just about as well known in the labor circles as Jimmy Hoffa That was
Walter Reuther. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
He is this generation's Hoffa or Reuther by far.
Yeah. So Mr. Trumka died today at 77, Richard Trumka. And we want to extend our condolences to his family and friends. And we want to watch what happens with that, as they pick a successor for the AFL-CIO.
Yeah, definitely a power broker in politics. While he tended to support the Democratic tickets, he wasn't afraid to work with other administrations, and he worked with Trump on several initiatives. And just all accounts, just an all-around good guy and an all-around outstanding leader for AFL-CIO. So it'll be interesting. It'll be to see how anytime there's a big change in leadership, whether it be through a passing or it be through a vote of the membership, it can definitely chart a different course for the unions.
Yeah. So speaking of the later this year in November, the Teamsters are going to vote on a new leader. Their leader has been for about the last 10 years or so, James P. Hoffa Jr., Jimmy Hoffa's kid, who has brought the union back. They've actually done some good things. They've grown the membership ranks. They are currently trying to unionize Amazon, which would really be a great thing. And so it looks like the president of our Teamsters he's been Hoffa's VP. I'm not going to say his name. You can look it up if you want to. But it looks like he's in the running. Hoffa's endorsed him. He does have a challenger, so we'll have to see how the election goes. But he very well could be the next Teamsters leader in November.
Interesting times. Well, hey everybody, great show, G-Man. Everybody, stay safe out there. Pay attention this weekend because there's going to be some big votes on the infrastructure bill. But yeah, get the shot. Don't delay it anymore. Get the shot, and it's not any kind of conspiracy against anything other than keeping you safe and keeping other people safe. And it's not just about you; it's about whether you can contract the virus and then spread it to other people too. So be safe, make good decisions. Let's take care of each other. And like we said, hopefully our friends on all sides of the aisle, we can get together someday soon and sit down and have a cup of coffee or have a beer and argue about policy, but we should never be arguing about health policy.
Yep, I agree.
All right.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Take care.